They said cancer would be my hardest battle. They were wrong. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday, March 16, 2021. The word carcinoma hung in the sterile air of Dr. Patterson's office like a ghost that had just sat down between me and my husband Derek. I was 34 years old. My mother had died of breast cancer when I was 15, wasting away while chasing miracle cures and pseudoscience until it was too late. I'd held her hand as she died, watched the light fade from her eyes. Now I could feel that same icy terror clawing its way up my throat. I looked at Derek, my husband of 9 years, desperate for an anchor in this storm. He squeezed my hand, but his palm was clammy and his grip felt distant, almost reluctant. "We'll fight this, Olivia," he said. His voice sounded rehearsed, like a line from a movie he'd practiced. "Whatever it takes." But something in his eyes was already calculating, already distant. I just couldn't see it yet. I opted for immediate, aggressive treatment. My surgeon, Dr. Nakamura, was the best in Seattle, but she was out of our insurance network. The pre-operation estimate came back showing a significant out-of-pocket cost. Derek sighed heavily when he saw the billing paperwork, rubbing his temples like I'd just told him I'd crashed his car. "Are you sure about this, Liv? Dr. Harrison is in-network. This is going to be a massive copay. We're talking $15,000. He framed it as financial prudence, responsible planning. But what I heard underneath was, "You're too expensive to save." The surgery was scheduled for April 5th. The day before, I was a wreck, packing my hospital bag with shaking hands. I found Derek in his home office on a video call with his headset on. "No, the 5th is completely blocked off," he said into the microphone, his tone annoyed. "My wife's procedure, it's going to be a logistical nightmare." He saw me standing in the doorway and his face tightened. He clicked off the call abruptly. "What? You'll be there at 5 in the morning to take me, right?" I asked, my voice small and uncertain. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose in that way that always made me feel like a burden. "Olivia, 5 a.m. is just really inconvenient. I have that investors meeting at 9. It's important." I stared at him, the room tilting sideways. "Inconvenient," I whispered. The word felt like a slap across my face. I burst into tears, the ugly kind where you can't breathe and your whole body shakes. He just stood there watching me cry, his expression somewhere between irritation and discomfort. "I just need a nap," he finally said, walking past me toward our bedroom. "I'm exhausted." He closed the door behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. I woke him an hour later, my face stiff with dried tears. "Derek, I'm telling you that I need you. I'm terrified. I need you to hold me." He did hold me, but it felt like a performance. His arms were stiff, his comfort hollow and mechanical. While I was in the hospital floating on waves of anesthesia and pain medication, Derek launched a GoFundMe campaign without asking me first. "Help Olivia beat cancer." The title was plastered next to a smiling photo of me from our vacation 2 years ago, before any of this nightmare began. When I saw it on my phone the day after surgery, still groggy and in pain, I was humiliated. "Derek," I rasped through my dry throat, "we don't need this. We have savings." He sat on the edge of my hospital bed and stroked my hair, his touch light and somehow reptilian. "It's not for us, Liv," he said in that smooth, persuasive voice he used in business meetings. "It's to let people help. It makes them feel good to contribute. You're taking that away from them if you say no." He was so good at sounding reasonable, at making his decisions seem like kindness. He became the public saint, the terrified husband holding vigil. People from his work, from our neighborhood, from my old college kept commenting on the page about what an amazing, devoted partner he was. The GoFundMe was a runaway success, hitting $45,000 within a week. Suddenly, Derek became obsessively frugal about everything. When I was recovering at home a week later, still weak and in pain, I suggested ordering Thai food because I couldn't stomach the thought of cooking. He shook his head firmly. "Liv, we have to be careful with money. We're living on people's charity right now. We can't just throw it away on takeout." He said it with this pious, martyred tone, like we were one step away from bankruptcy. He created this false narrative of poverty, making me feel guilty for every small comfort, every request. Meanwhile, he posted regular updates on the GoFundMe page about my brave struggle and his heartbroken but hopeful vigil. Each post was perfectly crafted, full of emotion and detail. I felt like a prop in his performance art piece titled "Devoted Husband in Crisis." Every word he wrote was true in the details, but somehow completely false in spirit. During my recovery, Derek withdrew completely from any physical intimacy. He moved into the guest room the night I came home from the hospital. "I just don't want to accidentally jostle you," he explained, his voice full of concern. "The surgical drains, the stitches, I'd never forgive myself if I hurt you." It was another kindness that felt like a razor blade wrapped in silk. One night, about 3 weeks after surgery, I was finally starting to feel a little more like myself. I was terrified of my new body, of the scars that marked me, but I needed to know that my husband still saw me as a woman, not just as a patient. I put on my softest robe and walked to the guest room. My heart was pounding as I sat on the edge of his bed and touched his arm gently. "Derek?" I whispered. He flinched. He physically recoiled, pulling his arm away like my touch had burned him, his eyes still closed. "Liv, I'm just exhausted," he mumbled, turning his back to me. "Please." In that moment, I believed him. I believed I was grotesque, that my illness had broken me in his eyes, that I was unlovable now. Just as I was starting chemotherapy in early June, my mother's last surviving sister, Aunt Helena, passed away unexpectedly. She left me the family property, Thornhill Manor, a 28-unit apartment building in Queens that had been in our family for 3 generations. It was a massive, crumbling responsibility. The building was old, the tenants were established, and the management was overwhelming to think about while I was fighting cancer. But I noticed a new flicker of interest from Derek. He was suddenly attentive again, poring over the rent rolls and maintenance records. "We need to protect this asset, Liv," he said, his eyes bright with focus I hadn't seen in months. "This is our future security." He immediately scheduled an appointment with his estate attorney. "We need to update our wills," he explained, "just to make sure that if anything happens to you, I can manage the property without your extended family trying to interfere or complicate things." I remember feeling a tiny flicker of gratitude. He was thinking ahead, protecting our future. What a fool I was. My chemotherapy ended, and I was put on a daily medication called letrozole, an estrogen blocker that would be my companion for the next 5 years, my lifeline against recurrence. Derek, in a jarring burst of attentiveness that surprised me, took complete charge of my medication management. "You've got enough to worry about, Liv," he said, setting up the pill bottle in a specific spot on the kitchen counter. "Recovery, follow-up appointments, rebuilding your strength. Let me handle this part. I'll make sure you take it every morning and evening, right on schedule." It felt, for one brief shining moment, like the man I'd married had come back. The one who'd brought me coffee in bed and surprised me with weekend trips. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe this trauma had actually brought us closer. Maybe he just needed time to adjust. Maybe I could finally let go of some of the crushing responsibility and just trust him. I should have known better. About a week into this new routine, it happened. July 14th, 2021. An hour after Derek handed me my morning pill with a glass of water and a smile, a wave of sickness hit me like a truck. It wasn't just nausea. My hands started shaking uncontrollably, a violent tremor that made me drop the book I was holding. A blinding headache pulsed behind my eyes, each throb feeling like someone was driving nails into my skull. My heart raced so fast I could hear it in my ears. I collapsed onto the couch, my mind spiraling into panic. This was it. The cancer was back. It had spread to my brain. All the treatment had failed. I was dying. I managed to grab my phone and call my oncologist, Dr. Sullivan. My voice was choked with terror as I described what was happening. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. "Olivia, those symptoms don't sound like cancer progression. It sounds like an adverse reaction to something. I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there any possibility you accidentally took a double or triple dose of your medication?" I was almost offended by the question. "What? No, absolutely not. Derek's been managing it for me. He's incredibly careful about it." Dr. Sullivan said, her tone thoughtful. "Well, let's monitor the situation closely. If this happens again, call me immediately. The symptoms you're describing, the tremors, the rapid heartbeat, the severe headache, Those are actually consistent with a significant overdose of letrozole. The episode passed after a few horrible hours. I felt wrung out and shaky, but the symptoms gradually faded. It happened again 5 days later, and then again 4 days after that. The third time was the worst because we had friends over for dinner, our first attempt at social normalcy since my diagnosis. Derek made a show of handing me my pill in front of everyone. "Time for your medicine, sweetheart," he said with a warm smile. An hour later, right as we were sitting down to eat, my fork clattered against my plate. My hand was shaking so badly I couldn't control it. I tried to speak, but my words came out slurred. I saw the alarm on our friends' faces, saw them exchange worried glances. Derek was instantly by my side, all concern and gentle touches. "Oh, honey, you're just not yourself today," he said, his voice dripping with sympathy. "The chemo brain is really bad sometimes. I'm so sorry, everyone. This happens." He was pathologizing me, using these episodes to paint a picture of me as fragile and unstable. To everyone watching, he looked like a saint caring for his broken wife. I just looked sick, weak, unreliable. That night after our friends left and I'd recovered enough to think clearly, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Dr. Sullivan's words echoed in my head like a drumbeat. Overdose, overdose, overdose. The next day, I ordered a weekly pill organizer online. When it arrived, I took the medication bottle from Derek's careful arrangement on the counter. "I've got this now," I said, trying to sound casual and not accusatory. "I need to get back to managing my own routine. Feel more in control, you know?" I saw something flicker in his eyes. Annoyance? Anger? But it was gone in an instant. "Of course, Liv. Whatever makes you feel better." I started managing my own medication, carefully counting out each dose, taking it at the same time every day. The tremors stopped, the headaches vanished, the episodes disappeared completely. I mentioned the improvement to Derek one evening. "See," he said with a smile. "I told you your body would eventually adjust to the medication. It just took time." But his answer felt too simple, too convenient, and something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. As my body healed through late summer and early fall, my mind started to clear. The fog of fear and pain lifted, and I could think clearly for the first time in months. I was sitting at the desk in our home office in late September, trying to organize the finances for Thornhill Manor, when a box of old files caught my eye. "Derek, licensing," was written on the side in my own handwriting. Curious, I opened it. Inside were old notebooks and study guides from 2013. Back when we were still dating, and Derek was desperately trying to pass his financial advisor certification exams. He'd failed twice and was terrified of failing a third time, which would have ended his career before it started. "I'm just not good at standardized tests, Liv," he'd said back then, looking so vulnerable and desperate. "But I'm good at the actual work. I just need to get past this one hurdle." I'd helped him. More than helped. I'd essentially done the work for him. Written his practice essays, created his study materials, walked him through every concept until he could parrot it back. His entire career, his license, his 6-figure income, all of it was built on fraud that I'd helped him commit. I hadn't thought about it in years. At the time, it had felt like love, like partnership. Now sitting in that office with those old notebooks in my hands, it felt like leverage. I closed the box carefully and put it back, but my mind was racing. The summer faded into fall, and the gap between Derek and me became a canyon. We used to love debating things, politics, philosophy, books. Now even simple disagreements turned vicious. "Well, you're lucky you're even here to have an opinion," he'd snap at me during an argument. Then, just as I'd start to respond, he'd yawn dramatically. "I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed." He'd go to the bedroom, close the door, and within minutes I'd hear him snoring while I sat alone in the living room, shaking with anger and confusion, staring at walls until 3 in the morning. It was October 20th, 2021, when I finally decided to look at the GoFundMe account. I was strong enough now to start thinking about finances properly. I'd planned to donate whatever remained to the Cancer Research Foundation in my mother's name. I logged into the account, expecting to see most of the $45,000 still there, since Derek had been so obsessive about not spending money. The balance was $127.83. I stopped breathing. My vision actually tunneled. I scrolled through the transaction history with shaking hands. Withdrawals. Dozens and dozens of withdrawals over the past 6 months. Canlis Restaurant, $340. Tiffany & Co., $3,800. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel, $1,650. Nordstrom, $2,200. The list went on and on. Thousands of dollars spent at expensive restaurants, luxury stores, high-end hotels. While I was recovering from surgery, going through chemo, taking medication that made me sick, he was spending the money people had donated to help save my life. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling like I was watching my marriage burn down in real time. Then something clicked in my detective brain. The Fairmont Olympic charge was dated April 6th, the day after my surgery, the day he'd said he was too exhausted to stay at the hospital with me overnight. I started cross-referencing the charges with my calendar, with Derek's work trips and evening meetings. A pattern emerged. A name kept appearing on credit card statements I pulled up. Payments to someone named Vanessa Torres. I found her on social media within 10 minutes. 26 years old, worked as a paralegal at a law firm Derek's company used. Pretty, young, completely oblivious that she was dating a married man whose wife was fighting cancer. Her Instagram was public. I scrolled through months of posts. There, a photo from a rooftop bar, her sunglasses reflecting the Seattle skyline, and in the reflection, just barely visible, was Derek's face. The photo was dated April 6th, the day after my surgery, the day I'd been alone in the hospital, terrified and in pain, believing my husband was home resting because he was too exhausted to stay with me. He hadn't been protecting himself from the trauma of my illness. He'd been celebrating his freedom, spending stolen money on his girlfriend while I fought for my life. Everything I'd believed about his distance, his coldness, his rejection, it all crumbled, revealing something so much uglier underneath. I sat him down that evening. I didn't mention the money yet. I didn't mention Vanessa. I needed to understand something first. Derek, our marriage is falling apart, I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I need you to hear me. I described everything, the loneliness during my illness, how I'd felt abandoned when I needed him most, the pain of his rejection, the way he'd treated my cancer like an inconvenience. I laid my soul completely bare. I cried. I begged him to just see me, to acknowledge my pain, to show me that somewhere inside he still cared. I talked for almost an hour while he sat there, nodding occasionally, his face a perfect mask of attentive concern. When I finally finished, emotionally exhausted and tear-stained, he took a deep breath. He looked at me directly, his eyes perfectly clear and calm. "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way," he said slowly. "But honestly, I don't feel bad about any of it." He shrugged, like I'd just complained about him leaving dishes in the sink. He looked genuinely confused about why I was so upset. That was the moment. That was when my marriage died completely. It wasn't fear of my illness. It wasn't grief or inability to cope with trauma. It was nothing. There was simply no one home behind those eyes. No empathy, no love, no basic human compassion. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark living room, my mind racing through everything with new clarity. The GoFundMe theft, the affair with Vanessa, the inconvenient surgery, his sudden intense interest in Thornhill Manor, the pressure to update the will, the way he'd insisted on managing my medication. And then Dr. Sullivan's voice echoed in my head. "The symptoms you described are consistent with a significant letrozole overdose." His careful attention to giving me my pills, his insistence on being solely responsible. The episodes that had stopped the instant I took control back. My blood turned to ice as the pieces clicked into place. He wasn't just stealing from me. He wasn't just cheating on me. He'd been trying to kill me. He'd been systematically overdosing me, slowly poisoning me, hoping my body would fail in a way that looked natural. Cancer patient dies from complications. Who would question it? And then he'd inherit Thornhill Manor, keep the GoFundMe money, and move his young girlfriend into my family's property. The old Olivia, the one who made excuses and believed in the best in people, died in that living room. Someone new was born in her place. The next morning, October 22nd, 2021, I called a forensic accountant named Patricia Washington. "I need a complete analysis of a GoFundMe account," I told her. "Every transaction traced. I want to know exactly where every dollar went." A week later, she called me back. Miss Thornhill, it's worse than you thought. He wasn't just spending the money, he was laundering it. Patricia explained that Derek had created a shell company called Cascade Consulting, LLC. He'd been making donations from the GoFundMe to this fake company, claiming they were legitimate medical consultation fees, then paying himself from the company account. This is textbook wire fraud, Patricia said, and possibly mail fraud too if he filed any false tax documents. The IRS would be very interested in this. I went to our storage unit that weekend while Derek was supposedly at the gym. I found the box labeled Derek, licensing, and carefully photographed every page. My handwritten notes, his practice essays in my words, old emails where he'd literally asked me to just write this section for me. You're a lifesaver, Liv. I'll pay you back forever. I created a comprehensive file and called the most ruthless divorce attorney in Seattle. There was one more piece I needed. Derek's locked safe in his home office. I'd never tried to open it before, respecting his privacy. That version of me was gone now. I tried his birthday, our anniversary. Nothing. I sat on the floor thinking, what did Derek really value? What actually mattered to him? I tried 06/14/2021, the date Thornhill Manor was officially transferred to my name. Click. The safe opened. Inside wasn't just financial paperwork. There was a life insurance policy he'd taken out on me after my diagnosis, $500,000. And a folder labeled V that contained a lease application for a luxury apartment in downtown Seattle with both his and Vanessa's names on it. He wasn't just planning for my death. He was furnishing his new life with my money and my family's property. The hardest part began then. I had to live with him from November 2021 through February 22 while my attorney built the case. I had to live with the man who'd tried to murder me. I made him dinner. I smiled. I asked about his day at work. At Christmas, he gave me a gift, an expensive cashmere robe from Nordstrom. To keep you comfortable, Liv, he said with that smile. I recognized the charge on the bank statement. He'd bought it with stolen GoFundMe money, with funds people had donated to save my life. I wore it. I thanked him. And inside, I was a pillar of ice, cold and unbreakable. One night in January, he almost caught me on his computer. What are you doing? He snapped, his voice sharp. My heart hammered, but I kept my face confused and innocent. Just looking for our insurance information for a prescription refill. My chemo brain is acting up again. I used his own excuse against him. He watched me for a long moment, suspicious, but finally let it go. February 28, 2022. I asked Derek to meet me at a neutral location, a conference room I'd rented in a downtown office building. It's about refinancing Thornhill Manor, I'd explained. My attorney needs your signature on some documents, since you're listed as my spouse on the title paperwork. He walked in at exactly 2 p.m., confident and relaxed, checking his phone. He was wearing an expensive suit I'd never seen before, smelling of cologne that probably cost more than our monthly grocery bill. Then he looked up and saw me. He saw my attorney, Catherine Price, and he saw two other people, Patricia Washington, the forensic accountant, and a severe-looking man in a dark suit. What is this? Derek said, his smile faltering slightly. Who are these people? Catherine slid a thick stack of papers across the conference table. Mr. Hayes, you're being served with divorce papers. Derek actually laughed, a short, ugly sound. Divorce? Fine. You know what, Liv? I'm almost relieved. But I'll see you in court. You know the law. I get half of everything. Half of Thornhill Manor, half of your accounts, half of everything. I just looked at the man in the dark suit. He slid a second, thinner folder toward Derek. Mr. Hayes, my name is Thomas Brennan from the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions. We've received a detailed anonymous report regarding serious irregularities in your 2013 Financial Advisor Certification examination. I watched Derek's face as he opened the folder. I watched him see my handwriting, my notes, the old emails. I watched the color drain from his skin until he looked gray. In addition, Patricia Washington said, sliding a third folder across the table, I've completed a full forensic analysis of the GoFundMe account, Help Olivia Beat Cancer. The total amount of $45,150 was systematically embezzled through a shell company you created. The IRS and the Washington State Attorney General's office will receive my complete report by 5 p.m. today. Derek was silent, staring at the folders like they were bombs. His hands were shaking slightly. He looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw real fear in his eyes. "Here are your options," Catherine said, her voice cold and precise. "Option 1. You sign this post-nuptial agreement today. You waive all rights to Thornhill Manor. You waive all rights to alimony. You walk away with whatever personal assets you brought into the marriage and nothing more. And if I don't?" Derek's voice was barely a whisper. I spoke for the first time, my voice low and clear and steady. "If you don't, I file a police report with Dr. Sullivan documenting my suspicions about the medication tampering. Mr. Brennan files his report with the state licensing board. Patricia sends her findings to federal investigators. And my attorney sends one more file." I slid a final envelope across the table. Derek opened it with trembling hands. Inside were copies of everything from his safe: the life insurance policy, the lease with Vanessa's name, bank statements showing exactly how he'd spent the stolen money. "That file," I continued, "also goes to Vanessa Torres, along with the real bank statements, proving you're not a successful financial advisor building a life with her. You're a thief who tried to murder his wife for her inheritance." Catherine leaned forward. "You'll be disbarred. You'll face federal fraud charges. You'll be defending yourself against attempted murder allegations. Your life as you know it will be completely destroyed. Or you can sign these papers and walk away." Derek sat there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 2 minutes. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists on the table. He looked at me with such hatred that it should have scared me. But I'd survived cancer. I'd survived his poison. His hatred was nothing. He picked up the pen. He signed every page without reading them. When he finished, he stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You'll regret this," he said. I smiled then, a real smile. "No, Derek, you will." He walked out of that conference room and out of my life. 6 months later, I stood in the office of Thornhill Manor on a beautiful August morning. The building was mine, completely and legally. Derek had walked away with his car, his personal bank account with about $8,000, and nothing else. The state licensing board had opened an investigation into his certification. He'd resigned before they could officially revoke his license, but his career in finance was over. The IRS was still investigating the GoFundMe fraud. Vanessa had broken up with him the day she received the anonymous package of documents. I heard through mutual friends that Derek was living with his brother in Tacoma, working at a car dealership. I'd completed my 5-year course of medication. My latest scans were clear. The word remission still felt fragile in my mouth, like if I said it too loud, it might break. But I was alive. I was free. I owned property my mother's family had built with their own hands. I'd survived cancer, and I'd survived something even worse, a man who'd pretended to love me while trying to kill me. My hand went unconsciously to the faint scar on my chest, the mark left by surgery. It was the only thing from that marriage I kept. And finally, after everything, I felt it beginning to heal.